Here we go with Yamas and Niyamas. There are 5 yamas. Now, these are the rules of the road, and they are the first limb of Ashtanga Yoga. Ashtanga means 8 limbs. Ashta is 8, Anga is limb, and Ashtanga Yoga means the yoga of 8 parts. First part, Yama. Yamas are things that you're supposed to do in relation to other people. And the first thing is Ahimsa. Ahimsa. And we'll write these for you so that you can have a visual on that. And for some of us, we're covering stuff that you probably learned 20 years ago, and I just bear with me. I never mind hearing it again because each person adds their own nuances to it. What does ahimsa mean? It means non-harming. You're not supposed to slap people when they irritate you. For instance, as tempting as it might be, you shouldn't do it. It's bad. Okay.
I've also heard ahimsa, like when you're in a posture and you're like pushing it so hard that you end up hurting yourself. It's also that too.
Exactly. So how many stages of ahimsa, what does that mean? You're not supposed to harm other living creatures with your words or your thoughts or your actions. So there's a bunch of different applications of that. Now, we know that slapping people who are irritating us is not the right thing. You'll be thrown in jail, or they will kick your ass, or bad things will happen if you're a violent person. But we hurt people all the time with our words. Now, it's usually like the careless remark or the sharp comment, and we hurt people that we love and who are quite close to us all the time by inconsiderate speech, okay? And that comes from our inconsiderate mind. So that's the deal. It's about your whole behavior and the way you talk and the way you think and the way you act. Vegetarianism comes out of ahimsa. All life consumes other life. Even if you're a bacteria, you have to eat some protein or something, But where in that chain would you like to participate in the process? For me, if something runs away from me and squeals when I grab it, I don't really want to eat it because it's too similar to me. I have killed animals and eaten them, and I know about hunting, and I grew up with it, and I know what that really is. And it's a bummer to kill like a big deer and watch it die. And it's a lot to impose on another creature because I'm hungry, and I'm not that hungry, actually. So for me, I don't want to be tied to that birth and death. I don't want to be tied to suffering and death. And that's part of life. That's no doubt. I have full respect for people who do choose to eat meat, but for me personally, and where I'm trying to go with my spiritual practice, I don't choose to eat meat because I know that it's full of the chemicals and endorphins that happen at the time of death. In all the adrenaline and cortisol and stuff that people and animals have in their blood at the time of death. If you're standing in the line of pigs that are about to get hit with an electrode or a hammer, or the incredible atrocity of the meat industry and slaughterhouses and I don't want that in my body. Okay, so that's an element of ahimsa.
There's some idea in some philosophy, I don't know what name, but that when you eat the meat of animal, you get the qualities of this animal.
And when you look at somebody that eats a lot of pork, they look kind of like a pig. And if they eat a lot of cows, they like this thick neck thing, and I mean, okay, maybe I'm a little biased, but you check it out for yourself. I'm telling you, look around, check it out, pigs and cows. Okay, so.
So we're looking like cucumbers.
Yeah, okay, I'm looking like a cucumber or a piece of tofu or what, you know. This is, of course, what always gets said is those poor little carrots that you're pulling out of the ground and they're screaming. Well, indeed. Yeah, some people don't eat root vegetables. Some people... Can you... I'll hold it. So, moving on, different aspects of Ahimsa. The words are the hardest one for sure. But then, think about this. Sometimes somebody has an expectation of us that's not reasonable. And then when we tell them that that's not actually what's going to happen, they experience a lot of pain and emotional disturbance, and we've caused it, but it's kind of their thing. So there's a time where hurting other people becomes a part of life and a necessary one. You could say that it's like playing chess and thinking that you're never going to take the other person's pieces. You will, and you have to, and you can't get out of it. So if a terrorist is coming up over the wall to shoot all the kids on their way to school, the Ahimsa thing to do is probably hit him over the head with something and make sure he doesn't shoot all the kids. Like you have to think about all those bottom line scenarios, and you know, life is not that precious. Actually, you look around the world, you know, how many millions of people have died from coronavirus now? And at first it was like, oh my God, 1,000 people have died. And now it's like, oh, it was only 1,000. Okay, never mind. You get used to it really fast. It's interesting how that is. But Ahimsa is the practice of mindfulness of the effects of our actions on other people. And taking great care and deliberation about the way that we affect other people with our words, with our actions. God forbid we should harm anyone unnecessarily. But, you know, if you've been dating somebody for 2 weeks and they tell you that they're madly in love with you and they're going to jump off a bridge if you don't marry them, then it's their problem. Okay? So, and there's plenty of exceptions to every rule. Okay, Ahimsa. All of the other yamas are contained within that. It's the same thing as the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have done to you. It's really prioritized in that way. Now, the next one is Satya. And Satya means truth. Sat is truth. So you're supposed to be a truthful person. Yeah. Now, is everything that's true harmless? Definitely not. If you really told the truth all the time, would you be a harmless person? I don't think you would. If somebody asks you what you think, and you Americans are the best ever at this. They'll never tell you what they really think, ever. They'll be like, oh, it's great. And meanwhile, they're like, pop, pop, pop. All kinds of problems. Cannot have conflict. Must never be honest. It's really weird. But truthfulness in speech and behavior is a virtue. So sometimes yogis are advised to not speak so much one thing you can do is don't talk so much. Will Rogers, it's Will Rogers Airport here in Oklahoma. He has one of his great quotes was, "Never miss an opportunity to shut up." It's a great thing. So also, when we misrepresent ourselves and people and things and the stuff that's going on, we create a sense of dis-ease in ourself. And there's outright lies, like somebody says, "Are you going to pay me that $300 tomorrow?" And you say, "Uh-huh," knowing that you don't have it and you're not going to be able to. That's a lie. But then there's exaggeration. And, was the fish this big, or was it really not that big? And are you really going to be 5 minutes late, or is it really more like 15 or 20? And are you really happy about this thing, or are you actually just moderately okay and slightly annoyed? And it is, so people exaggerate a lot about a lot of things, and there's a very gray area. And on the one hand, when somebody asks you if you're doing okay, they don't really want you to burst into tears and tell them your most heart-wrenching problems. But on the other hand, if you're really not okay, will you be like, "Oh yeah, I'm great"? A lot of people will. And so the thing is, the more of a bullshitter you are, the more you sound like one and look like one and feel like one to the people around you. And the more you exaggerate and manipulate your speech and your representation of things to your advantage, the less people trust you. And your speech takes on a particular sound when you're an honest person and you don't care what people like, good luck or bad luck, who can tell this is what's happening, deal with it. I'm dealing with it, you're dealing with it, everybody has to deal. If you can't deal, that's life. This is where it's at. That vibe creates trust in other people because they may be afraid of you a little bit, but they know that you will say what's going on. And that level of honesty and integrity that comes from a person who really practices truthfulness in their life and in their relationships is it's like an invisible power that emanates from that person. And you can't really see it with a microscope or measure it with a ruler, but it is a big power in life. And when somebody who's a steadfast practitioner of truth says something, their words have great power and weight. And it's even said that if they say something, it will come true because of the power of their truth. And so there's a huge, there's a big emphasis on that. And so there's a parable about a yogi who's sitting in meditation, and he sees this beautiful deer come running by. And he notices this deer, and it runs by, and then a few minutes later, here comes the king with all of his guys, and he's hunting this deer. And he says, "Hey, did you see a deer? Which way did the deer go?" And the yogis thought, if he tells the king where to find the deer, the blood of that animal is on him now. It's his karma that he helped to kill this animal. So he says, the eye can see, but it cannot hear. The ear can hear, but it cannot see. And the king said, "You fool, get out of the way," and goes on. So by babbling nonsense, he was able to avoid telling the truth. And so that's an example of the kind of tact that people who really don't want to lie sometimes resort to avoid getting put into that position. you can always pretend to be crazy, or pretend that you didn't hear it, or, like this. So Satya is very important. Now the next one is Asteya, Asteya. And Asteya is not to steal. Okay, so you shouldn't steal. One time Mila and I were walking in Kyiv, and there are a lot of pickpockets in Kyiv, and we saw this scenario where some lady caught this guy trying to steal her purse, and my God, was it ugly. It was all going down in Russian, remember that? I didn't understand what they were saying, but it looked super intense. Okay, so that kind of thing will happen to you if you steal. Don't steal cars or money or whatever. But people rip one another off on all kinds of subtle levels all the time. There's the stealing of intellectual property. Like if somebody tells you something, and it's a very good, clear thought, and you turn around and use those very same words and act as if it's your thought without mentioning that you heard this from somewhere else. In a way, it's kind of like lying, and it's also kind of like stealing. Or if a person is not really happy to give you their attention, and you insist on pushing yourself, and women know about this a lot. If you force yourself on somebody in the sense that you're engaging them constantly and demanding their attention, and they're not really willingly giving it to you, at some point it becomes a kind of theft. You're stealing their energy. And that comes in, an energy vampire, we call it sometimes, is somebody who's very needy and needs a lot of attention. And we have this expression, high maintenance, a person who's very high maintenance, and as soon as they come around, they're going to be asking for this or asking for that, and they really need you to pay attention to them, and if they're around, you just can't hardly do anything else because they're here, and they're just that sort of person. That's called ripping off people's energy, and it's not really an honest thing, and it's actually perfectly legitimate to use your Satya and say, you know what, I need you to leave because I'm concentrating. And if that hurts them, then that's also part of life. And I've been told to bug off myself, so I kind of understand how it feels. And I mean, so Yamas and Niyamas, especially Yamas, are about these kinds of things. So these three, Ahimsa, Satya, and Asteya, being, we could say, very conscientious about how we receive and give energy of all kinds, whether it's money or attention or time or material goods or whatever it may be. That exchange that inevitably happens and must happen is a sacred thing, and it should be attended to with care and great reflection about the effects we create on other people. So those three are the big three. And we have a kind of culture in America and other places in the modern world where we say, you've got to look out for number one. Step on the little guy. You got to get ahead. Business first. Go out and make a name for yourself. And come on, these kinds of ancient spiritual teachings don't really square with that kind of thinking. And we'll get back to that again when we hit aparigraha and santosha. But The next of the fourth of the yamas is Brahmacarya. And Brahmacarya has to do with sexual conduct and how we behave in our sexual life. It, strictly speaking, means celibacy in a lot of the text, but it's also sometimes translated as countenance, or we could say a placing of value on one's sexual energy. Don't you misspell Brahmacharya. Okay. So there is this idea, and I touched on it yesterday, that sexuality is a very concentrated form of our energy, and that when you expend that energy, you lose some of your brightness and some of your ability to concentrate. Now, there's a lot of resistance to those sorts of thinking in Western culture, but it's always in Eastern culture there is this idea. So I just always thought that if you could get the Ahimsa, Satya, and Asteya involved in your love life, probably you'd work it out okay. Like, okay, just try not to lie or hurt anybody really badly or steal anybody's time and attention, and you guys do what you want about that. But it's also a placing of value on yourself and your body and your time and your energy, and saying, no, I'm worth something. My sexuality is not really just about gratifying my senses. I want to use it constructively to create something beautiful that, like a relationship that I could potentially thrive in, as opposed to a one-night stand at a bar or, something like that. It's a placing of value on yourself, and also respect for other people's energy as well. So without that, you're just a horn dog like everybody else, and it's not very yogic, and you will certainly be humiliated at one time or other, especially if you're a yoga teacher. Okay, so we'll pass on from that, but that's a biggie. And to act like sex is not part of life is very foolish and naive. It's a huge part of life. It's part of everybody's awareness, and if you're in the back of your mind obsessed about that, maybe you need to sit on that corpse for a little while and get clear about the impermanence of some of these things. Now, the fifth and the last of the yamas is aparigraha. And aparigraha means abstention from greed. So people who are bent on material gain and the hoarding of possessions have a particular kind of mind and a particular kind of speech and behavior because they are obsessed about material life. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't have a job and that you shouldn't take care of your material needs in the world. And I don't believe that that's the teaching. It's the obsession with that element of life that aparigraha deals with. Now, remember the sadhus that we were discussing yesterday? As wild as they are, they're also free. And there are some sadhus who every night before the sun goes down, they eat all the food that they have, and they spend all the money that they have, and they use everything, all material goods, so that they go to sleep and they wake up with nothing every day of the world. And they start fresh. They're not supposed to they're not supposed to own more than they can carry on their back. Okay? So that's an interesting proposition for those of us who have enormous closets full of clothes and more possessions than we could possibly even remember. You know, like I've lived in one house for 35 years, and about 7 or 8 months ago, or maybe a year ago, I decided to get rid of a bunch of stuff. It was like 2 or 3 truckloads of stuff, just random stuff that I barely even remembered that I have. And my mind felt freer. And I realized that in those objects is a lot of memory and a lot of samskara and attachment, and you know, each thing reminds me of something rather lovely to get rid of. So attachment to material things and possessions is not aparigraha. Aparigraha means to not be that way. Parigraha is attachment to material things.
So it's like material detachment.
Yeah, hoarding, not to hoard material things. And so, yes.
Can that be like translated into, I guess, like food and money? Like if you make a lot of money and never give any back to charity, or, you know what I mean? Can that be translated to more than just like physical material things, but also like?
Yeah, it's greed. It's greed on all levels. So yeah. Now, those 5 things have to do with other people and how to interact in the world with other people and be able to maintain a spiritual practice. So those are the rules of the road. Do we always follow the rules of the road? No, we've broken every single one of them at some time. We've transgressed every last one of it. You know, each person in this room has blown it multiple times. Let's be real. Okay, what was the result of doing that? Was it not suffering? It always kind of comes around to suffering. So it's a map of how to avoid suffering. But what happens when you suffer? You evolve. So who can really say what's good or bad? It's not about good or bad. It's just about if you don't want to suffer, you should follow those principles because they will prevent you from suffering and they will prevent the people around you from suffering. They're natural laws. Just like gravity is holding you down on the floor right now, and that's good. But if you climb on top of the roof and you jump off the edge, gravity will slam you into the ground and kill you. It's not gravity's fault. Gravity is just gravity. You got crossways to one of the rules, one of the natural forces, and therefore you were harmed. But gravity doesn't care. Gravity is just gravity, right? So these things like lying and stealing and sex and greed and hurting other people, they're also just natural forces that are there. And then you have to look at karma. And what is karma? And how does karma work? So karma is an interesting word, and it's become part of popular culture. Like everybody almost everywhere in the world knows what karma is. And I think the Beatles' John Lennon's song, Instant Karma is Gonna Get You, it probably was one of the moments where it got spread widely. But everybody understands that karma is something that is the results of your actions. So when you do something that creates a strong form of karma, good or bad, there's a word called nanubandhana, which means in you, BHANDANA. It's a long word, but anyway. Nanubandhana. It's karmic debt. It's like you've done something or other. Let's just say that when you were a kid, you, I don't know, stole your friend's parents' phone or did some rotten thing. And you knew, and you didn't get caught, but you just knew that you did that and that it was really a bad thing. And so you always had this little bit of guilt about that. Can you read that okay? Yeah. Here, you don't have to hold it in front of you. I want to see your face. Okay. And you can just lay it down when we're not using it. It's kind of an unwieldy thing. Anyway, karmic debt, good or bad. Maybe at one point in your life, you did something really good for somebody and you knew that you just really helped that person. And then what happens? You carry that with you. You carry that with you. And that good or bad, each of us has something, these things that we carry. And so those things are like seeds, and they grow and sprout and bear fruit at a particular time. Now, there are 3 kinds of karma, and they're basically past, present, and future. So there's karma that you've worked through in the past, and then there's karma that is right now, and it's about to bear fruit. It's the karma that's expressing itself now. And prarabdha karma is the one that's now. Now, Prarabdha. Prarabdha is the one. Now, guess what happens when you run out of prarabdha karma? You have to leave your body. It's over. Game over. You don't have any more things to work through in this life, and you're out the next moment.
Is prarabdha the present?
Present.
Okay.
Present karma.
It's past.
No, present. Just change the arrow. Anyway, you understood how to spell it. That's enough. It's present.
Like, if you, there's always, I've never really, it's abstract to me. So there must be several different karmas going on that are at different stages in your life. And like, there's not just one karma all the time. Like there's past,
Oh, no.
good, bad, ugly.
Yeah, good or bad. Now, karma versus sin, like sin is bad. It's the bad karma, or you could say. But karma can be good or bad. It's just the results of your actions.
There is also I don't know the names of this, I don't remember the names, but it is in Karma Yoga. There is 3 kinds of karma, which is, I don't remember the names, but this is the karma which you can kind of destroy in
Yeah.
your life. There is the karma which very hard to destroy in your life, but you can't. You will put a lot of effort. And there is the karma which you can't do anything with it. And like third one, which you can't do anything with it, is like where you was born, your genetics, your like place where you was born, something
Yeah.
which you like you just
You have no control over.
you can't
Yeah.
control
The
it.
fact that you're born in America, for instance.
Second, like karma which you can't change, but it's very hard. It's, for example, again, if you have some genetic, like some problem with health, just like everybody had before you, but if you know that you can try very hard to change your lifestyle, your diet, your everything, and you can change it. You can change this kind of influence on your life.
This is the first time I've realized the correlation between what you're talking about and what is it with Christianity or the prayer. So accept the things
Oh, like the Lord's Prayer?
Yeah, Lord's Prayer, like that.
Forgive us our sins as we forgive those who trespass against us. That one.
It's serenity prayer, like accept things, or change the things you can change, accept the things you can't.
Okay. Yeah. Well,
And this, yeah.
okay.
And there's the karma which you can change. So it's basically what you do. You choose what you do the next day. You can or can?
Karma you can change. Like for instance, you borrow something from someone, and they did you a favor, right? So down the road, you could do a favor for them, and then the karma is even. There, it's like in the Bible it says, "The wages of him that is hired shall not abide with thee overnight." When somebody does something for you, you pay them. Karma is finished. It is, but also there's so many fine layers to all of these things, and we do good and bad karma all the time. We slap mosquitoes. You just took a life. Should you slap the mosquito? Well, some people say you shouldn't, but they itch, so I do. And that's why bathing is important. The minor sins, as Guruji puts it, can be washed away by water. You bathe yourself, and that's why. And so the awkward conversation, the slightly weird vibe that just stuck with you, and now you kind of have an apprehensive feeling after you spoke to this person, and it was a little weird, and you're wondering if, take a bath, take a shower, get your head wet, and quit thinking about it. This is another thing. But karma yoga, what is karma yoga? Karma yoga is to perform service in the world. And this is where we're crossing over from Patanjali into Bhagavad Gita, okay? So the idea is that when you perform karma, which you cannot get out of, as long as you're in this body, you have to have something to eat, or you can't stay in this body. If you don't eat, you die. You require material things. How are you going to get that food? Somebody's going to have to pay for it, or you're going to have to earn it, right? So transaction is necessary. How will you do that? There's plenty of ways. You can rob banks and steal money on the internet. You can be a hard worker and whatever. But you're in karma. You can't escape it. And karma yoga is where you try to do service to others for no material benefit. Nope. Bhakti yoga is different. There's bhakti, jnana, and karma. These are three different kinds of yoga. Karma yoga is the first one. They are part of the same kind of system, but they're different. So everybody wonders what to do. Nobody knows for sure what they're supposed to do. Especially young people. What do I want to do? What am I supposed to do? What's my dharma? You know that word dharma, D-H-A-R-M-A. Dharma means right action. What was I meant to do? And generally, nobody knows. They're not sure. Actually, when we become parents, we have a glimmering time where we actually know what we're supposed to be doing. And there's tremendous strength. Anybody who's doing something and they know they're supposed to be doing it and they're just doing it, they're unconflicted and therefore they're very powerful. If you're doing something and you're thinking, well, maybe I should be doing this, but maybe I should be doing something else, and I'm not really sure, and blah, blah, blah. Well, your vibe is wishy-washy and not solid. So that's the thing. And karma yoga, when you start to do karma yoga and look for opportunities to do service for other people, you develop a sense of, I'm a part of something bigger than me, and I'm serving that bigger than me aspect, that thing that's bigger than me. Therefore, I am comfortable resting in the world. You're making friends with the world, in a sense. And it doesn't really make any sense from a business point of view, or a get-rich-quick kind of scheme, but people like Hare Krishnas who they cook amazing food, they offer it to God, and they take it out in the street and they feed it to anybody that wants to eat it. That's karma yoga. And the theory of karma yoga is that all the stuff you've done, which was not particularly kind or nice, eventually becomes outweighed by your service to humanity. And we've all done something or other that was not cool at all, and we know it, okay? And we carry that. And when you go out and start doing stuff to really help other people, and you have no other motive, you're not trying to get money, you're not trying to get rich, you're not trying to get sex, you're not trying to do anything, just sincerely, like, this needs to be done, here you go, I'm going to do it for you. I'm glad to have an opportunity to do something for somebody, and I don't need any payment, I don't need you to do it back, I'm just here to do this. That's a very pure kind of a state of mind to be in.
But how to get this pure state of mind? Because many people can do it, but in like you can convince yourself that you're doing it from pure heart, but under this conviction you can have thought, oh, maybe I will get some money from this.
Right, or they'll recognize
Yeah,
more.
so-
Yeah, the recognition.
But the reality is that there is nothing free in the world. You're trusting the universe. If you do stuff, things happen. That's the law of karma. You think helping that little old lady across the street, or picking up your neighbor's trash, or taking your neighbor grocery shopping when their car breaks down, or whatever it is, there's a million opportunities to serve in this suffering, horrible world. You know, somebody has COVID and you get a care package together and take it over and say, here's some cough medicine and some food, and I just want you to know I care about you, and please let me know how you're doing, and if you need anything, I'm here. And, you know, that will make you feel so good inside. And that alone has the power to heal and to lift you up. So, no, there's nothing free, you know, and then that person who you did something kind for, in turn, they're going to see somebody in need and they're going to think, oh, gosh, I better help because I got helped the other day and I'm going to just pass that on. That spirit has the power to really help the world. And the world is hurting right now. It really is. So, when you screw up, karma yoga is a way of working on it. And then we have to look at tragedy and unexpected things which happen in life that we can't explain. Because ultimately, none of us know what's going to happen. And you know the old joke about how come good things happen to bad people, or bad things happen to good people. That's what it is. Why do bad things happen to such good people? And the answer is to make up for all the great things that happen to bad people. Like you don't, it's so mysterious in life how things happen and who gets what and how it all works out. So in Western culture and Christian thinking, we sort of have a concept of, And I mean, whether you're a Christian or not, you still grew up in this culture. It's hardwired into your thinking, and you just have to accept that you do come from a particular culture and a background, and the prevailing idea here is that you have to behave according to the will of God or else you get punished, more or less, you know. So if you break the Ten Commandments, you'll be punished and you'll suffer after you die, etc. This is all just what we mostly grew up with. And karma is a little different because it accepts the idea of reincarnation. And that's a game changer, okay? Because what if in some previous existence you did some very, very good thing and you gained some, they call it punya or virtue, and you're carrying that with you in this life. And then out of nowhere, some wonderful thing happens and you just wonder, my God, how did that slob get all that? Or how did, this jerk suddenly get this amazing job and everything's just going so well for this person? And, sometimes we wonder. And then on the other side, suddenly, in a moment, all can just turn to rags and ruin and everything. And sometimes very awful things happen to wonderful people, and we wonder, what happened? So in yoga philosophy, they think about the previous karma. That's the variable and unknown. So when good things happen, they accept it and say, well, this is great. When bad things happen, they also accept it and say, well, this is my previous actions working themselves out, and I'm going to try to evolve from this. So it's a particular way of dealing with life in the world. And the reason I'm mentioning karma in relation to the yamas is because the yamas are the tools and behavior patterns that help you to avoid bad karma in life. And people who follow those ideas recognize each other very quickly. There's just the way they talk, the way they think, the way they look, the way, that vibe is there. And people who are also following those principles, they recognize each other immediately. Whereas people who really don't give a crap about any of that, and they're just, they'll be good as long as they feel like it, and then if they don't, they won't, and they're not interested in spiritual practice. They don't see that. It's invisible. Okay? So those are the yamas and a little bit about karma yoga. Last thought on karma yoga. When you don't know what your dharma is, if you engage in karma yoga, you will eventually become clear what your dharma is. By going into service, it is revealed to you what you're supposed to do. This is one of the great reward of karma yoga. And you don't do anything without a reward. It's always, karma yoga is not selfless always at all. On a material level it is, but you wouldn't do it if you didn't think there was a benefit in it for you. It's just not a material benefit. So there's no free ride, and there's no wasted effort, and everything you do comes back around. What comes around goes around. This is the expression we always have. So there's a verse from Gita Prasangaha that sums up the Bhagavad Gita in 32 syllables. Svadharma Jnana Vairagya Satya Bhakti Ekagocharaha Narayana Param Brahma Gita Shastre Samivitaha. This is Yamunacharya's 32-syllable summary of the entire Gita in, 3 lines. Okay. So the first third is this first lana vairagya. If you, Svadharma means your dharma. Not, dharma is also, it could just be right action in general, doing the right thing for one person or everybody. But Svadharma means an individual's correct action. And so most everybody is not very clear on what it is they're supposed to be doing. And karma yoga is the tool to figure out what it is you're supposed to be doing. And then jnana is knowledge or wisdom. And if you engage in karma yoga, you get a kind of jnana, of wisdom, and you get insight into what it is you're supposed to be doing. And then you get vairagya. Vairagya arises through knowledge. Vairagya, again, is detachment. So those three words summarize the first third of the Gita, the first 6 chapters, actually. And in Natamuni Sampradaya, and the way that it's taught, and you should use this in your teaching. When you teach something, and this is hard for ramblers like myself, but when you teach something, the first thing you do is you summarize it, and you just say very bluntly and very straightforward, this is what this is. Then you expand it, and you go into all the ramifications and parts and pieces and implications, etc. And then when you get done, you pull it all back down to its nutshell form. And so you know what it is, and you can say, and so you can chant the entire Bhagavad Gita in one verse, or you can go into all the infinite drop-down menus and go into all the deep stuff. So, what did grandmother say? Cleanliness is next to godliness. Does anybody ever have a grandmother that said that? A lot of us did. I did. Okay, well, Saucha. Saucha is cleanliness. And it means being clean on a bunch of different levels, okay? So there is a lot of protocol amongst, especially, you could just say there's a lot of protocol in Indian culture about cleanliness. So I want to talk about some of that, because I think that in the time of COVID, it becomes more relevant. Like, for instance, some people, now Brahmins are really the people who probably follow these things the closest, but if you ask them, they will tell you that everybody should do it. It's just that they're the only ones still doing it, or some of the only people still doing it, but these things are universal ideas that everybody should follow. Like, for instance, they wake up and they wash their mouth out, because when you sleep, you wake up and you have a funky taste in your mouth, and they don't believe that it's healthy to swallow that you should wash your mouth out. In fact, they scrape their tongue and spit all that out before drinking water or anything else. Okay, so there's like the first little thing. And they typically, yogis all recommend that you go to the toilet and shower early, first thing. And that's very difficult if you eat at all different hours of the day and night and have no real life rhythm, okay? If you wanted to go to the toilet and poop at the same time every day, you would also have to eat and sleep at the same time every day, and that's very tricky for a lot of us. And this is it gets really difficult. So let's look at some of that now. In the more extreme things, the touching of the body is considered a big deal in Indian culture. So if you would, and they don't like shaking hands for that reason. They don't want to touch your hand. Electrically, energetically, bacterially, like they don't really. And so the protocol is that they should take a shower if they shake your hand. Okay? And even in extreme cases, like very orthodox practitioners of those disciplines, if the shadow of someone who doesn't practice those things should fall across them, they would take a shower and cleanse that. Now, that sounds really pretentious, I know. However, what about in the time of pandemic? Suddenly it all sounds very logical, doesn't it? Okay? So my theory is that those ancient codes of cleanliness were, in fact, ways of surviving in times when there were no antibiotics. And, thousands of years ago, these things were simply necessary to ensure that you weren't going to catch a staph infection and die, or some communicable disease. So they're very careful about who they eat with and how food is prepared. Only one person is allowed to touch the utensils that cook the food. And, that it's a very traditional way of living and life, and it may not apply in modern culture in America or other countries, but there's a great, dignity to the person who prepares the food and looks after the health and well-being of the family. And the whole house, a traditional Indian house, has a room where you take the shoes off. Nothing from the outside comes into the house. And it's like layers of cleanliness. And the cleanest, most kept area is the temple room, where the deities are. And so the divine and any objects that represent divinity are extremely clean. And next to that is the kitchen and the food area, where all food is offered to some aspect of divinity, whatever that happens to be. And how many cultures pray over their food before they eat it? Most, in fact. And so this stuff is all under the heading of Saucha. So taking great care with your cleaning. And there are a lot of kinds of yogic cleaning. Brushing your teeth is one of the kinds of, it's called dhoti. Dhoti is to clean something. And there are extreme versions of, like swallowing the cloth. Have any of you tried that? Have you ever tried? It's awful, to be honest. But you take a long piece of cloth and you swallow it and you pull it back up. And it's really cool. I recommend it. Like on a Friday night when you don't have a lot going on, you can always just try swallowing the cloth, and So enemas are another one. Like on a Friday night when you're not busy, you can always. So also there's panchakarma and all these Ayurvedic cleanses and things where you like swallow salt, drink salt water until you throw it all back up. It's another one. Neti. Neti is a very practical thing where you pour water through your nose, and people do these things. A brief side digression on neti. Salt absorbs water. Okay, or no, tissue absorbs salt. I think that's what I mean to say. So, your body has a certain amount of salt in it. If your sodium levels get off, you will die, in fact. So salts are, perhaps unhealthy when you eat too much salt, but with no salt, you can't operate. So if you're going to pour water through your nose, make sure that the water is saltier than your tissue, a little bit. And then the water will pass easily through your sinuses and out the other side. Otherwise, if your tissues are not as salty, if the water is less salty than your tissues, salt attracts water. That's the thing. And so it tends to get stuck in your sinuses, and some people try neti, and it's called jala neti when you use water, and it gets trapped in their sinuses, and they get a sinus infection, and they'll tell you that it's the worst idea they ever tried, and they'll never do it again. On the other hand, if it's done correctly, it can be a wonderful thing and really clean your nose. Now, the other kind of neti is with a string. Did you ever do that when you were a kid, where you like take a piece of spaghetti and go through your nose? I was a disgusting little kid, so you know. But you can do it with a string, and it's made from wax. It's got wax, and you poke it up and you reach in and pull it out, and that will be part of the exam at the end. I really hope you guys are ready for all this. So these, exotic kinds of cleanliness. Okay, but there's internal cleanliness, which would be part of that. So cleansing your guts, cleansing your nose, cleansing your body, taking care with all that. But then there's external cleanliness. And like if everything in your life is in a category called I'll get it later, and your car is a mess, and your house is a mess, and your floor is dirty, and your dishes are dirty, and your laundry is everywhere, and all your stuff is all over your desk, and your life is chaotic and full of crap and full of things that you're going to get later, then it has this effect on your mind, and it makes you super spacey and depressed. And so having order and clear space and open, clear space to move and do and be is an important thing. And family people really struggle with that. I struggle with that. But it is a spiritual practice. And so I just wanted to, mention that. Now, if you have family members who like to throw food on the floor, and you might, then it becomes a devotional karma yoga kind of practice to clean up the food and the mess. And you have an option of like I was saying the other day, of being very angry and feeling disrespected. These kids are just throwing this stuff everywhere and tracking dirt on my floor, and now I'm cleaning, and I'm just a slave to these rotten kids. And I mean, sometimes as parents, we feel like that. And the older they get, the more you kind of tend to resent it. Okay, but I can say that there is a way of being devotional in that practice, and seeing the mundane, everyday tasks of washing the dishes and sweeping the floor and cleaning and doing those things that we all have to do can be a spiritual practice. So, so you can view it as such. You can view it as just absolute bondage, or you can view it as a means to liberation and to having your life be a certain way. It's the same with tools and you know, whatever the tools of your trade are. If they're all just in a big pile and you can't find any of them and you don't even know what you've got, your whole approach to your trade, whether that would be construction or plumbing or carpentry or whatever it is just like you're not effective. So getting organized, staying organized, being aware that that has a huge bearing on your mind space and your ability to function. It's a spiritual practice. So that's Shaucha. And next one is Santosha. So Santosha is, and it's sometimes spelled with M and sometimes spelled with N, and I don't necessarily know which one is right, but Santaosha. So, yeah. And it means contentment. Contentment with what comes to you without asking. And it's the opposite of greed. Greedy people are not content, and content people are not greedy. And it's a belief also. It has a connection, of course, with aparigraha. It's a similar kind of, you know, behavior thing. And it's sort of like, you know, one example given is you're hungry and you walk into your friend's house and there's a bowl of fruit sitting there on the table and you're really hungry and you're looking at this fruit thinking, oh my God, I'd love to have one of those apples. Will you A, just grab the apple and eat it? Will you B, wait to see if they offer you something, or C, ask them for it? Say, hey, I'm hungry, can I have an apple? If you are, and it depends whose house it is, of course, but you incur karma if you ask. If you say, hey, can I have an apple? Then you now have created a small karmic debt. And one thing I meant to say about karmic debts before, they're stored right here in the middle of your forehead, the trikuti, these places where all that stuff is like, it's the webcam, okay? It's recorded on the SD card of your karmic debt. So, anyway, yes. If they offer it, it's karma free, usually. Sometimes we don't accept gifts from people who we don't want to have entanglement with. So it depends on, now if it's grandmother's house and she says, would you like to have an apple, sweetie? And then you say, oh, of course I would, even if you don't really want it. You almost feel obligated to take it. But if it's somebody's house that you really don't like and don't feel comfortable with, and even though you might be hungry, they may offer you something and you say no. And this is another thing about the Indian culture. I've watched my teacher at 84 sit, and he brings his own water. If he would have anything, it would be from him. He won't accept anything, not one sip of water, not coffee, not food, not anything. I've seen him sit for hours and teach nonstop, full attention, full awareness. Tadachar, who you spoke with yesterday, day before. Yeah, no problem. They will not accept food from outside. You can offer all you want. They can be hungry, it doesn't matter. They won't. So, sure, there's a time and a place for every scenario, of course. But santosha is also, it's translated as contentment. To be content with what is. So, there's another element of it. It's to be content with yourself. And it's also not to live in a state of, I'm not okay now, but if I had XYZ, I will be okay in the future if. You are okay now. You are enough. You're great, just like you are. You don't have to wait for some random thing to happen to be okay. Give up the I'm not enough, the I'm not okay. You are okay. You could be content with who you are right now and realize that you're lucky to be who you are. Be proud of who you are. Don't think that you're not okay. You are okay. This is a mental illness and a weak kind of way of thinking that we all fall prey to at times. Lack of self-confidence, lack of self-love, lack of belief in one's self. This is all not the practice of santosha. That's what santosha is supposed to help you with. You have to believe in yourself. You have to quit waiting on something to happen so that you can be okay. You'll wait your whole life. You'll die. You still won't be okay. You're okay now. Renounce all that nonsense and be okay. Because life is short, and don't waste your time being discontent with stuff that you can't do anything about. Life is beautiful. And you don't have to feel like you're not enough. You don't have to feel like you're, oh, if I could just get my foot behind my head, or if I just had like $1 million, or if I had a little more money, or if I was a little, thinner, or more sexy, or more beautiful, or more smart, or if I had that degree, or if I could be with this person, or if all of that is speculative, and it's in the end it's bullshit. You're fine right now, right here, as you are. Okay? That is santosha. So you can convince yourself that you're not, but you have to work at it, and actually you are. Deep inside, pure joy. Get in touch with that. Merge with that. That's yoga. And, maybe you need to do a bunch of asanas to do that. Maybe you need to get out of pain. Maybe you need to take care of your diet and your life and your relationships and your speech and your mind a bit. But yeah, stop it and just get over yourself and go on. This is the thing. So, saucha and santosha and tapas. Tapas is an expensive snack in a Greek restaurant. No, tapas is austerity and discipline. And so if you, let's just say you have two people, and one of them has been eating junk food and playing video games their whole life, and they've never really had to get a job or do anything, and mom and dad have always taken care of everything, and they have a housekeeper, so they don't really have to do much, and that's been life, and and then you put that person, let's say, sitting next to an Olympic athlete who's had to be very disciplined and work hard, and one of those people will be glowing and very bright, and one of those people will be relatively quite dull and dim, and that glow is something called tejas. It's the brightness around the person, like Jesus has a halo around him, and tapas is to burn. It's that which creates brightness. It's also discipline. Yeah. So tapas is the glow of discipline. And it's that vibe of, I'm going to suck it up. I'm going to go barefoot. I'm going to stop drinking coffee. I'm going to do less of the stuff that I know I don't really need to do and more of the stuff that I need to do but might not want to. So a very simple example is I'm going to create a yoga practice that I do every day. Some days I'm not going to want to do it, but I'm going to do it anyway because it's my life and it's what I do, rain or shine. If you're dedicated to a practice, you don't just do it when it's fun and all your friends are there and the sun is shining and you're in a wonderful park and it's just the perfect moment to do yoga. You do it no matter what. You do it when it's your bones are a little crickety and you might not have the best practice and you ride your practice through the ups and the downs of life. But tapas in general, like an extreme version of tapas would be like the yogis that hold their arm up in the air. That's a form of tapas. But what if that guy, murdered some people earlier in his life and he had some horrible thing in his past that he just could not let go of? Maybe some extreme form of tapas like that would make sense. For me, I can't really relate to holding my arm up in the air for 12 years, but you guys can try it and let me know how it goes. I did try it for 5 minutes one time, just because I was curious, and I held my arm up for 5 minutes. It hurt like anything. After the blood starts to run out of your arm, it gets so uncomfortable. I can't imagine. Anyway, tapas is the glow of discipline. If you put a person, let's say, who's practicing yoga and working hard on their mind and their speech, and they've got, maybe things aren't perfect, but they're trying to keep their space in order and their life in order, and they're working on it. And you put them in a room or in a situation, a workplace perhaps, with somebody who's just a total slob and really doesn't have anything together. And they're tired and they're hungover and they're late and they spilled something on their shirt and they forgot their wallet and they, you get that person together with somebody who has tapas. That person who has no tapas will want to be told what to do by the person who does. It's an invisible force that dominates the situation around. It's a kind of power. And it again, you can't see it with a microscope or measure it, or but it's a very real force in the personality of the person. And especially if they're aligned with things like truth and harmlessness, because not everybody who has tapas is harmless. It can make your ego huge. It can also make you a very powerful jerk, with your organized life and your super disciplined everything. Doesn't mean you're kind, but to be full of discipline and dedication and aligned with yamas and harmlessness and truthfulness, and this is really, really powerful. That makes you a light in the world, and it really helps pull out your good qualities. So just like practicing yoga postures all the time, doesn't make you a good person or a kind person. It just means you're a fit person. Okay, so you could be a complete jerk and just have 10 times more energy to be a jerk. And if you think that doesn't happen, you're mistaken, because it does. So you could be very good at yoga postures, but relatively very unevolved in other elements of life. Now, moving forward, svadhyaya. Svadhyaya, S-V-A-D-Y-A-Y-A. It means study. Study of the self. It also means study of text, of scriptures. It's not specific to yoga text. It could be any text. It could be Plato and Aristotle. It could be the Bible. It could be the Quran. It could be the Bhagavad Gita. It could be anything that's written about spirituality. And it is the practice of inquiry into the great mysteries of life. You're supposed to ask yourself, what's the point of my life? What do I want? What, do I like my life? If not, why? What happens when I die? Do I believe in God? If I do, then what is God? Am I a member of a religion? If so, why? How do I know I know? What is the truth of life in my honest opinion? And you're supposed to work on it and not be content to let somebody just tell you what that is and just say, okay, I guess that's how it is. All right. I go to church every week, so I guess when I die, I'll go to heaven. Hope so. Because the thing is, life gets really intense and heavy things happen. And that's when your spiritual practice is put to the test. And if it's all speculative and you didn't spend any time really working on it yourself and you just kind of borrowed it from somebody and thought, yeah, okay, that sounds about right, yeah, good, and went back to Facebook, then you're going to be really in a jam at some stage. The suffering of life is intense and we're all challenged. Whatever belief system you have, you will undergo experiences in your life that challenge it. And so svadhyaya is super important because it's self-inquiry and critical thinking. And, I don't care what you believe, really. I'm working on what I believe. You can believe in God or not, or you can believe in religion or not. You can, but impermanence, I'm afraid, is a reality. And you're going to enjoy certain things, and you're going to suffer also. So I think that having that svadhyaya is super important. And that's really what I'm encouraging you to do in this training. That's why I'm asking you to read these books. That's why I'm asking you to listen to these videos, is because and you can think anything you like, about, your synopsis doesn't have to match mine, okay? We don't need to argue about any of that. But I want you to work on it for yourself. I don't think that a good yoga teacher should be shallow or should just be non-reflecting. And material culture doesn't really encourage us to look deep in our heart and ask those kinds of questions. But human beings have struggled with those same questions since the beginning of time. There's no, it's always the same. What's the meaning of my life? What am I doing? Why am I doing it? Do I like it? If not, what can I do to change it? What do I really believe? So that's svadhyaya. Last one, Ishvara pranidhana. Ishvara is a word for God. It's not like a specific God. It's sort of like Godhead. So if I say Shiva or Krishna or Jesus Christ or Allah, like those are gods. But Ishvara sort of means like all-pervasive God. Now, if you wanted to differentiate between Ishvara and Brahman, that would be a little tricky. I'm not totally sure. But Ishvara Pranidhana Dva is the one place in Patanjali Sutras that it mentions Godhead. And strictly speaking, Ishvara Pranidhana is devotion to God. So you have a hard time being devoted to something that you don't believe in, obviously, and you're going to have to work it out on your own through your own svadhyaya. And so if you don't believe in God, in the sense that most organized religions would put forward. That's fine. But there is something bigger than you in the world, and you could study that mystery, and you could develop some kind of compassion or devotion to it. So it's okay if it's a mystery, and it's okay if we're students of life and we're evolving our understanding one step at a time. I think that's a very important perspective to keep, because otherwise we become fixed, and we also become angry when somebody challenges our established perspective. And that's why people argue so much about religion, because they don't want anybody poking holes in their theory, and they get angry if you start undermining their belief structure, and people get very offended by that. So if you know that you're a student of life and that you're going along and trying your best and thinking about life and about death and about God and about all these great things that humanity has contemplated since time immemorial, and you're doing your best to behave according to the primary suggestions, and you're contemplating what divinity might mean, I think that's about as good as it gets. So if somebody else has a different vision of what that means than you do, power to them. What's the problem? And what I do have a problem with is fundamentalism and the idea that other people need to agree with someone's particular view. If somebody knows the truth and somebody has a connection to God, why would it have anything to do with me? Like, why would they need that validated? What's so fragile about their point of view that they need other people to agree with them? Like, that's really weird to me. And so I don't like the idea that we're supposed to make other people agree with us, or that there's something wrong with other people who see life in another way. I have very good friends who are atheists and who don't believe in God at all and who really hate organized religion. And sometimes I find their perspective to be quite refreshing. And I respect anybody and everybody who has sincere thoughts of their own about these great things. And if you don't think about those kinds of things, and you don't develop any kind of internal relationship to those ideas, you might be a wonderful scientist or a wonderful athlete, or you may excel at some other sphere of life, but you won't excel in that sphere of life. So yoga is by definition internal study and discipline, and it's got to be worked on. And so I don't think you can be a yoga teacher and not ever work on any of these deep fundamental things. But those 5 things have to do with internal behavior, your attitude and behavior toward yourself. Yamas are about external relationships. Niyamas are about internal relationships. So those are the rules of the road. And as with Yama, people who are following disciplines like Niyama, they walk different, they talk different, they just think different. It's a kind of attitude of mind and demeanor, way of being that you can recognize immediately if you're trying to do it, and it's completely invisible and passes right by you if you're not. So those are the 10 primary suggestions for a spiritual aspirant. They're universal. they're not limited to any one culture. Those are ideas from yoga philosophy, but all spiritual practitioners from all cultures recognize those qualities in other people. So you don't have to, it's also just straight up being a good person and doing the right thing. You know, it's not really, like our parents taught us a lot of this when we were kids, hopefully. So can be very complicated, and you can talk about it a lot, or it can be very, very simple. And it's just doing your best to avoid suffering and trying not to cause other people suffering. And without some of that, you won't be able to practice your self-cultivation and development. Like if you're just a big fat liar and you're having sex with 100 people and you've got all sorts of problems in your life and you're ripping stuff off and you've got all kinds of huge karma coming at you from different sides, the chances of you getting into some kind of real discipline and healing of your body and taking care of yourself is pretty low. So, to the extent possible, try to be good. And if you can't be good, just realize that you're going to suffer and try to learn from your suffering so that you'll get clear on why it is that you're supposed to be good. Okay? And eventually, sometimes people say, well, I've already learned that lesson. It's not wrong or right, I just don't want to learn it over again. I know what's going to happen, so I think I'll let that one roll on by. And you're allowed to do that. Everybody has a right to choose. So, until then, drugs, sex, and rock and roll. Carry on until you get clear that that's not what you're trying to do. And, when you suffer enough, eventually things kind of get clear. I mean, sometimes even if it's clear, you might forget temporarily and have to be reminded, but eventually everybody gets clear, okay? So.